Thank you so much for your patience. My name is Kim Lantis here with Nearsoft and our UX webinar. Our apologies for some slight delay. Presenting today are Georgie Bottomley. She's joining us as a senior UX researcher from none other than Atlassian. Hi, Georgie.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today, guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, so Georgie is joining us from the land down under. Part of the reason why we've had a little bit of our delays today, kind of Arturo back scenes, helping get us all connected intercontinentally. So cool. And then also joining us is Misael Leon, our own Nearsoft teammate. He's our product designer here at Nearsoft. So today, like I said, we're really excited. We're joining up Nearsoft with Atlassian. We're really excited about this. So information for you all out there from two different awesome teams and on their perspectives of UX and Agile. So just to let you know, Misael is part of our UX and design team, a bit of a larger team here. So there they are, their beautiful faces and what we can do for you and what we do here at Nearsoft. And then, of course, Georgie is part of an even much larger team. There's the design team at Atlassian. You can see them. Georgie is in that photo. That's her hand. I love that shot. Very, very fun. So what are we here to talk about today? Today we're going to look at how to do research with agile teams, which can seem a little contradictory from the onslaught, right? Because agile being all about spontaneity, moving as quickly as you can, and then user research, and the immediate thought is that that's kind of time consuming. So what we really want to do is bust that myth, myths of user research, and have a practical guide for you. And so as we move on today, we're just going to show you that agenda real quick. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk about some of those common misconceptions, and then how you really can integrate user research and agile. And of course, talking about how to create your own research lab, tips for remote teams, which becomes more and more applicable every day that passes, and then how applying UX research to your agile team really benefits your team. And then, of course, that Q&A for us. So if you have any questions as we move through the webinar, please let us know. You can either send them through Twitter. The handle is Nearsoft UX Webinar, or, of course, at the Nearsoft website where you're joining us today for the webinar. So let's move on. So tell us, guys, as we get started, the first question is just the very basics. What is user research?
Right. So it seems like user research and the agile practices exist separately, each one on its own. And then the challenge comes when you try to do user research in agile teams. As you very well said, that the pace that an agile team runs through it's really fast, and you need to be really precise on the activities that you are going to be doing during the sprint. So that's why I would like to start by telling about user research. What is it exactly, and then what is it that is agile? Just as a brief recap. So short story on user research is a series of techniques that focus on understanding the user behaviors, motivations, needs, and barriers, everything that goes through the needs of this person that we are working for. But we do this by observation and measurement. So short story is just talking to people so you can understand who has the problem that you are solving and how that problem takes shape. Because there is no way that we can create a solution without interacting with the human being that is experiencing that issue. What do you think, Georgie?
Yeah, I always think it's absolutely incredible that I get paid to talk to people. I think I'm one of the luckiest people on earth. Yeah, I entirely agree with you. It's talking to people to ensure that we have a real problem that we're actually solving. It's very easy in product and in tech land to end up in your little bubble, in your office within your four walls, and not necessarily realize kind of what's happening in, I call it the real world, with your customers, to ensure that you're actually kind of solving problems for them.
Right, and I believe this is particularly important because we're in the business and we want people to pay money for the products that we are designing and building. But that is not possible. I mean, it's not possible to create a meaningful solution if we do not have the customer input into the process that we are working. And let's go over some types of research that that you can do during any project. We're just going to go over them really quick because it's not the intent of this webinar to go in depth to each one of them. And basically what we have is two types of research that you can do. It's qualitative, which is basically just gaining insights on the subjective response that people have towards their environment, the product that you're building, the context in which they live, and all these deep motivations that they have. And on the other hand, we have this quantitative approach in which you're going to be getting numbers out of surveys, perhaps the Google Analytics or the A/B testing that you might be doing between two different versions. In the end, quantitative is going to tell you what's the problem, but that's not the whole story, right? On qualitative, you get the reasons behind the problems that you are experiencing with the product.
So, for those of people like myself who aren't as intimately involved as Georgie and yourself, when might you use the qualitative? When might you use the quantitative? Do they need to go together? And then also, do you have personal preferences?
Georgie, perhaps?
Yeah, so for me, qual and quant are two sides of the same coin. So you're only ever going to get half a picture if you just do qualitative, or you're only ever going to get half a picture if you just do quantitative. So typically we see a lot of companies or a lot of startups investing quite heavily in A/B testing or MVT, so multivariate testing. And one of the things that I've often perceived as a researcher is people come back with all these analytics, with all these stats about what customers are doing, but they actually have no idea why they're doing them. So, hey, we're going to A/B test, the color of the button. Brilliant. More people are clicking the color of the button. Let's update all of the buttons to be this color. You can't necessarily draw a causal effect through quant data. So maybe if we look a little bit about into the kind of the Agile process and some of the misconceptions there, we can start showing you at the different stages in Agile where we would maybe lean more heavily on one side of the seesaw than the other, if you like.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Okay, let's move on then. So we have that. We have user research existing on its own, but then you have this approach of building software, which is Agile, and Agile has taken over the software industry simply because it works. It allows you to go iteratively and do incremental development on the project, and you can adapt yourself as the project evolves over time. Basically, it's just running short sprints that allows you to quickly adapt to the user preferences or perhaps the pulse of the market. And the way to sense this pulse of the user preferences is user research. So you need to plug those activities into these sprints, these really short sprints. So the question is, what is it that we can do that is efficient, that is precise, and that it can be accommodated into the sprint as well. However, I do think that there are plenty of misconceptions around regarding how to do it and when and who's the job.
Or even starting with this, I don't know this. Like, it's not my job to do this. I write the code. Is there that feeling of separating yourself, perhaps?
Right.
I think it can absolutely depend. I think you're right. The majority of people that I've ever worked with or spoken to really want to be closer to a customer. Like, really understand that knowing their customer is at the core of them being better at their job. But I think quite often it can feel very challenging to know where to start and to know how to maybe broach some of those conversations or have some of those questions. So quite often you kind of mentioned at the beginning, like, people often think research takes months and months of time, costs loads and loads of money. How do we know that what we're going to find out at the end of it is actually going to help us? As you say, like, whose responsibility is it? Right. And I think some of these are just kind of barriers to entry, for want to use a UX term. They can often kind of be barriers for people to actually just go out and speak to their customers or speak to their potential customers so they can understand what's going on out there.
Right, and I get this a lot when we are pushing these activities within the team or even with a client, is that it might be too expensive to spend all that time on one particular user research. And perhaps this is because they think that research is a very extensive and very robust activity that's going to take months and months to develop. And also it comes with the problem that who's the job to do the research. I mean, it's always somebody else's work. I mean, we do not have a researcher in the team.
And when it comes to when it comes to development, I mean, is researching your user a relatively new field in that sense? I mean, how long have you guys been at it, or how long has Atlassian been doing it? Because I think maybe perhaps too our influence comes so heavily from like what you see in Hollywood, in media, or you think like you know, the FDA, like drug research or medical research, which does in fact take weeks, months, years, decades in some cases. But is this a relatively new field, and is that and why we have to distinguish it from what people would generally think of when they think of research?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there probably is something in that with the big adoption of UX and kind of customer centric thinking that kind of I think kind of came onto the tech market. My gosh, maybe 5-6 years ago. Around the same time, there was an awful lot about lean approaches, and we've certainly talked about that already. Like, how do you shorten that feedback loop so you can ensure that you're building the right thing? Because typically in software development, when we were looking at kind of waterfall processes, you'd make a decision and you wouldn't necessarily get feedback as to whether that was the right decision until, you know, sometimes 2 years, 5 years after you made that decision. So I think all these changes we've seen in software development is all about shortening those feedback loops. And with Lean Startup, Lean UX, the kind of the bursting of UX onto the technology scene, I think that's really helped us shorten our feedback loops. And as researchers, I think we have worked out, you know, how can we do just enough? How can we do little and often to ensure we're getting feedback? But as you say, like, we don't need to go off and do 6 months of research. Something that I find quite interesting, I don't know if it's relevant for this webinar, but something that I find quite interesting is a lot of researchers now actually come from the field of UX. So whereas previously a lot of researchers would come from kind of academic fields, which, as you say, they would have a lot more of the premises and the education around those kind of longer, more intense research projects. I'm seeing a lot more researchers nowadays actually transitioning from UX, which means they've got a much clearer idea of what is it that we need to know and how can we just get a signal on that.
Yes, and I think you mentioned something really important, and on my experience, the work of a UX designer, product designer, or a researcher, or whatever front you are at, you need to do client education or team education, because they're not going to come and say, we need to do this research and go deeply into understanding this particular problem of the product. It's our job, or it's the product people's job, to push to have these activities along the process, as we will see in just a few slides, how to do it. But
Perfect.
I think part it's the client education or the team education, depending on your business model.
Right, like just how software development has changed and become more agile, so has research.
Right. We need
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the massive kind of gotcha moment,
Yeah.
I think, in this webinar, and as you guys will realize, is actually research is super easy to do, incredibly cheap, incredibly easy. There is nothing from stopping you doing research. Even if you don't have research in your title, even if you don't have design in your title or product in your title, it doesn't matter. These things are super easy to pick up, and so important for you to do.
Right.
Perfect. So let's bust those myths. Let's talk about it.
Can we call ourselves Mythbusters for now? Yes. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's
Can we have a
watch to the end of the show, because we really are going to blow something up. I'm kidding.
the camera, maybe. So, all right, let's go for some tips for integrating your in Agile, user research in Agile. We have 4, which is just 4 concepts, really broad concepts, and then we're gonna show you how to integrate exactly your user research into the Agile process. So the first idea that we want to convey here is that no matter what stage you are at of your process of developing the product, you can test any idea that you have. Even if it's just on paper, you can do it, and you don't have to wait to have this fancy prototype on InVision or whatever tool that you are using. And simply, as long as you have an idea, a tangible idea, you can show it to your customers and bring that feedback into the process. The other one is test small hypothesis. That is treating that knowledge gap that you want to gain in small manageable portions. You don't have to research like the whole product or the whole system that you are building. For instance, you might be working on one particular feature, like some weeks ago, we wanted to test this moderator feature on one of the products that we're building, and we went out and ran some guerrilla testing. This is just exposing what we have on InVision to users, right? And we learned a lot from doing just that. I mean, the feature was not even built, and we just wanted to see if that was going to solve the problem that we spotted through user feedback that we gained from a ticket from support. So we
Nice.
kind of validated that was actually a thing. And so the thing is that if you formulate this hypothesis that if we include this moderator feature, we're going to lower the ticket support from people complaining about not knowing how to use a product. So in our case, that was really simple. We just went out and tested that particular portion, and our hypothesis was right. I mean, we created that moderator, and then tickets stopped, at least from that part of the product.
Nice.
Okay, so you need to make this validation work visible. And what we mean by validation work is just the research activities that you're going to do. This is really important because you need to change the way we assign these research activities. All of a sudden, it needs to be part of the plate of the backlog of the team that is going to be working on the sprint. Because once the research activities are assigned, it cannot be ignored. I mean, all of a sudden it's somebody's work, and that kind of solves the myth of who's going to be responsible for this.
Right, because when something's everyone's problem, it's no one's.
Yes, another way to say this is that we need to rephrase the goals for each sprint. So it's not about shipping these 2 or 3 features. The goal will be to solve this particular problem, and the problem is that we have many support tickets. So all of a sudden, the goal for that sprint would be to lower the tickets from support in that particular problem. And that could be a feature, that could be something else. But the way that we rephrase the goals for each sprint should change to accommodate these ideas. And I believe that if we do this, we can prioritize learning above shipping. And this is a really shift in mentality, and I know you guys at Atlassian have been doing this for quite a bit now, in which you promote these activities within your team, and so everybody gets a piece of the of the research activity is shared among the team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I've actually ended up instigating, I think, in the last 3 companies that I've worked at is a weekly cadence of usability testing. So at Atlassian, that means that every other week we get people into the building and we just throw whatever we've got in whatever state in front of them. And if we haven't got anything, we just have a chat. And I think there's something really, really important to have regular conversations with people. And as soon as you say, okay, well, Friday or Thursday or Wednesday, people are coming in, you'll be amazed how much stuff you have to test. You'll be amazed how many assumptions, how many questions you have. And as soon as you start doing that on a recurring basis, you actually find you end up making smarter decisions because you built that empathy with your customer.
Yes, so our advice would be to really put that user research activity into the backlog. So whatever you are using, Kanban or Trello or whatever management tool that you're using, please do go ahead and put that activity there, that you need to validate this portion here, and so it's assigned and cannot be ignored now. The other would be to involve the whole team. So this answers the questions that who's the job anyway, right? We don't have a researcher on the team. But if you train as a designer or a product manager, if you train other members of the teams, even developers, to run this test and run their own validation work with anybody from customers or the users, they're going to be happily doing so, because this is a way for them to validate their own work. We have a quite, well, I'm not going to say like a bunch of developers here, but we have already some people interested running their own tests here at Nearsoft. And that's quite a victory for us, because all of a sudden it's not only about coding, but creating a product for solving a particular problem for a person.
Mm. And I have to say, I have found that developers have always been my strongest advocates when it comes to coming closer to the customer, because the developers really, really care as to whether the product is a success or not. Because
Right.
all of that work, all of that time, all of the effort that they've poured into, a new feature or an update or a change, if they see that that isn't making an improvement, I think that's devastating for them. So I absolutely love getting engineers in to take notes during any of the sessions that I run. And normally that's a great way for me to then kind of create traction within that team, because the developers will say in the planning session, oh, but have we tested that? I remember speaking to and actually, if it comes from, it sounds silly, if feedback like that is coming from someone that isn't you, then you're winning.
You're
Right.
like, yay! When your developer
Yeah.
says, "Have we tested that?" You're like,
And
I have
Just
a
want to give
role
them a
model.
hug. Yeah.
and I guess that the advice here is to invite them by starting small. Like if you invite them to just witness the test or take notes, I think that's a great start. And with time, you will see that they will want to run the show for themselves, because there is so much feedback, so much rich feedback that they can get out of it. They're gonna ask you to perform the test themselves.
Before we move on, I do want to remind folks that they can ask questions on the website where you're watching the webinar, uxinyourself.com. Also with Twitter, the handle is Nearsoft UX Webinar. And that said, we do have a question. Do you guys want to hear that question now? It does fit into the topic we're talking about right now, or wait till the end? Cool. So this one comes from Bruno, and I believe Bruno is joining us from Brazil. So we got 3 continents going on now, folks. 3. All right. So he says, I would like to know if you include how much better, as in a percentage, the new design will perform when you're creating the hypothesis. So in your hypothesis, do you quantify that? Did I use that word right?
Yeah, perfect. So at Atlassian, we quantify. I think working in a team of engineers, it can be very hard not to quantify things. Like often metrics are a really great way to tangibly show the improvements of design. So we do quantify things. Ms. Ayel mentioned, reducing support tickets. There's several other ways. So there's several kind of UX metric frameworks that you can use. So there's SAS, there's UMX, UX, there's several different kind of metrics that you can also ask right at the beginning of a test. That allows you to quantify a customer's perception of a design, and then you can again score that against the current and see like how much that is improving as a percentage. I wouldn't say that you always need to do it.
Perfect.
Contentious thing.
While we're looking at this, there is one more question as well. This comes from Mari. Mari, I'm not sure where you're from. I'm sorry. But this question is directed particularly toward you, Georgie. And she says, where do you find different people every week to do user testing? Are they all target users?
Yeah, lovely question. No. So another crazy myth, usability testing, you must get customers, or you must get very specific types of customers. Depending on what you're testing, I think that really governs the types of people that you're getting into the building. So say you're testing on building, actually you want to find people who have never used your product before. If you're testing UI or interactions or animations, maybe, you can have people who don't have an awareness of your product. They just need to be a human being that breathes and lives and talks. Because understanding UI should be irrespective of the context of your product. Yes, if you're talking about things like problems, if you're talking about how people understand something, so their mental model, their flow, then yes, you will need people who have the context of your tool, or the people that have that problem. But we don't always need to do that. So I find Twitter and meetups are actually a great way of recruiting people, depending on the office space that you're in. I've previously had great success just putting a poster up in the lifts and saying, hey, what are you doing on your lunch break? Do you want to come out and hang out with me, and I'll give you money and you can pay for your lunches for the week. So you can definitely kind of get creative about the ways that you're testing your products. And I don't think you need to be as strict as some people often think that they need to be.
Perfect. Thank you. By the way, for those of us who don't use European English. A lift is an elevator. I'm kidding.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you. It's funny because I know a lot of our listeners right now are probably English is probably their second language to start, so then it might get confusing. And so cool.
No,
We're good.
that's a brilliant catch. Lots of these words I don't
Three
realize are English.
continents. Here we go. Cool. No, I love it. I'm just giving you a hard time, Georgie. You're a blast. All right, cool. So I don't think we have any other UX research questions, and I believe we've covered that pretty well. So where does it fit? Where does it fit, and how does it fit into Agile?
Right,
Let's get to the goods.
Yes. So basically, remember the yellow circle that we saw in the previous slide? That's the actual sprint, right? But usually when you are creating a new idea, we add this red circle, which is the process of understanding and creating the idea for the first time. And there are several points in there. And the first one is just to understand the problem that we are solving, right? There are a few different research activities that you can do in this process, but in the end, what you want to understand is who are the users, what are their pain points, and how they are solving that problem right now, before your product, and the motivation and the context in which they do solve that problem. And for research activities, we can say that you can do interviews. Always talking face-to-face with a person will get you more nuances of what they are saying and what they are trying to accomplish. And you can also do surveys and observation. Anything that you can do just to watch people in action, solving that problem that you also want to solve with a product or with software. And basically, it's just get out of the building and go watch people in action.
I love to equate this stage of research a little bit like fishing. So at this stage in the project, you're looking for your room has no lights on it, and you're trying to feel for the shapes. You're trying to work out what's going on in there. So you're throwing your fishing net incredibly wide, and you're trying to catch everything. You're trying to understand the full context of your customer, so you can really start to pick up on, what are these shapes in this dark room? What are the shapes in my fishing net? So you can then start to kind of hone in on this problem space. So these really big, broad, wide research activities are great. So observation is fantastic here, because you then pick up on all these little things like, they have 2 monitors, or, they look at the email on their computer and then they pick it up on their telephone. It's these sorts of contexts that are really important for you to capture here.
I remember once we were trying to understand how people were planning their vacation. So we actually went to visit people on their offices, because that was kind of the audience that we were trying to analyze. And we noticed that people were constantly interrupted by meetings, by phone calls, and by other peers coming into the office. So we noticed that we were going to have to deal with that in our interface. So and we decided in the end just to break all the fields that they needed to fill by small chunks, because these people are always going to be interrupted. So but we will not know that beforehand if we hadn't been in that place, watching that in action precisely.
That's
and I think it's so important to get this stage right, because if you don't know what your problem is, how on earth are you going to solve it? How on earth is your product going to be successful? And I think this is the stage where people normally move it maybe a little bit too quickly, but it's absolutely vital that you're solving a real problem.
And I say this, that it was for new ideas or new products, but think of new ideas as new features as well, or problems that you are starting to grasp from what's going on. So perhaps you have a support ticket, perhaps you have some complaints here, or perhaps it crashes here and there. So all of a sudden you have a problem, but you need to understand that problem first. So that's why you need to go out and talk to people. All right, so let's say... I'd
also say that this is... Sorry, I'm going to dive in again. I also think that this is interesting when quite often in a product team, someone will come to you and say, our competitor has this feature, we need to have this feature too. And actually all you end up doing is having sort of essentially an arms race, and you can end up having lots of features and you don't necessarily know why you have them or how they relate to each other. So ensuring that you always do this understand phase. Yes, absolutely, someone can come to you and say, hey, we need to create this feature, but you as a product team need to understand why. What is that solving? And it might be that your competitors got it wrong. It might be that feature isn't useful, or people aren't engaging with it. And I think this is vital.
Right. So let's say that you now understand the problem and you have some idea of what's going on, and you need to land that problem into a solution. And that's why you can create some concept, some early concept, let's say paper, perhaps, or really something really raw, something that at least convey the idea. And you need to put that into customers' hands as well. We often do here rapid paper prototyping, which is basically just that, having your idea on paper and show it to people. And the only thing that you want is to gain this early feedback just to see if you are on the right track. This is not a prototype. This is not going to be everything in the end. This is not going to be the final solution, but at least you have an indication that this is where you're going. So as soon as you have an idea, you should go outside and validate that idea. Okay, Georgie, you want to mention something? I saw you nodding, like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that's really lovely. So often, as we've mentioned several times, so often people think they need a fully working prototype to be able to get feedback. And actually, if you look at the feedback that people give, if you give them something very high fidelity, they're going to give you high fidelity feedback. So if you give them a fully clickable prototype, they're going to give you feedback on color, on button, on font. And actually, if you want to test a concept or an idea, all of those things are getting in the way. So if you want to get feedback on an idea, it's much better to just present an idea without all of those kind of layers of abstraction that we tend to put on top as a designer. So even just phoning up a customer for a call and saying, hey, I've had this idea. Like, what do you think? How does that work for you? Absolutely works at this stage.
So once you have your idea validated, or at least you have some feedback on it, you can do this more elaborate prototype, clickable prototype. We oftentimes do something on Envision. Arturo, can you change the slides? So you already talked about validate, and now we created a prototype, and now we are testing it. Change the slide, please. So right now we have our clickable prototype. We oftentimes try to simulate how that product should work as much as you can. I mean, I do use Envision a lot, and I try to simulate interaction there. And the nice thing is that we're going to get some feedback from something that feels really, really like the final product or the final feature that we are going to be building, but with no single line of code so far. So I think that's a nice thing about doing research at this point.
So earlier on, we were talking about quant and qual, so qualitative and quantitative insights. And I think with these two circles, the circle on the left is kind of envisaging, visualizing, problem-solving cycle is very heavily focused on the qualitative insights that you're looking for. The why, what's going on, like why is this happening? And then on the right-hand side, when you move into more of a development process, we then tend to lean more towards the quantitative side, because you're able to do things at scale there and get metrics around behavior.
All right. So once you have your idea validated and you are ready to move on to the actual developer, but to the actual development, but you might not do like the requirements very specific because you already have the design ready and you already have your idea validated. So it's good now to pass on that to development. And once it's being developed, you can start testing these ideas really early on. As soon as you have something working, you can go outside and run some usability testing again. So this way you can make sure that your product or your feature is working according to what people are expecting and what people are feeling about it. Right? So, yeah. Okay, cool. So, but how does this look in practice? Let's show you now a cool practical guide so you can run this test and create your own lab, user lab, as you guys did in Atlassian.
Yeah, so I'm going to, again, bust another myth here. Whenever people think of usability labs, they often think of kind of two-way mirrors, big, expensive rooms, lots of kind of high-tech stuffs to allow you to do this sort of thing. But I want to give you a little bit of a step-by-step guide as to how you can create, slide please, as to how you can create your own research lab. So you can get a sense that actually it isn't as difficult as this. Hi, sorry, can we have the next slide? Great. So the first step that you need to do is, sorry, Arturo, can you hear me?
Could you change the slide, Arturo?
Sorry, I'm going to whiz through these quite quickly. So maybe if I just shout out the word slide, maybe if we use that as a prompt to move to the next screen. Great. So step number 1 is to find a space. Now, at Atlassian, I did this as part of an internal hackathon. So all of the steps here that we're going to walk through today, I did in 24 hours and with 0 budget. So when I say find a space, I mean find a meeting room. That's all you need. To be able to do a usability test, you need a meeting room and a laptop. Incredibly nowadays, all of the equipment and technology that you need to run a usability test is on a laptop. So you've got a front-facing camera, you've got a microphone, and inbuilt in Macs, for example, you have QuickTime, but there's lots of other screen recording software tools that are absolutely free. So when I say anyone can do a usability test, I mean anyone can do a usability test. If you have a room and if you have a laptop, you are absolutely fine. Slide, please. What we do at Atlassian is we kind of beef this up a little bit. So we actually add a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, and we put an extra microphone and camera in there. You don't need these. Atlassian, as you know, builds productivity tools for teams. So we like to try and make it feel a little bit more like an office or a work environment. So we just put these in so people feel a little bit more comfortable. But as I say, you can absolutely run this off your laptop. If you are adding these extra pieces of tech, often the IT team have things kind of hanging around. If not, you're maybe looking at $150. So this isn't a big outlay. So once you've got your space and once you've got your tech equipment set up, the next step that we do is invite participants. Slide, please. So we typically do this via email. As I mentioned, Twitter is a great way to recruit people. I find meetup groups are really useful as well. Often there's lots of people that are really, really involved in the community. Let me take you through a bit of an example email that we sent. So slide, please. An engaging subject line is really, really important here. As we all know, we all receive hundreds of emails a day, and just having something that encourages people to click on it is super, super useful. Slide. We also encourage you to have a good description of the study. So what it is that people are actually going to be doing when they come into your building or when you kind of have a telephone call with them. Slide, please. And you also give them a very clear sense of where they need to be, when they need to be there, and how long the session is. So again, it's just setting expectations, letting them know what's happening. Slide, please. And if you're offering an incentive, putting the incentive in there. So at Atlassian, we do offer monetary incentives, but I've worked in companies where we've done swag, or we've just offered them a cup of tea and a biscuit, and they've just been really happy to be able to come in and have their opinions heard and get feedback from, one of the companies that they love. Slide, please. We also use self-sign-up tools. I would really, really encourage you to use these. We all hate admin. I don't think there's anyone out there that enjoys sending more emails. A self-sign-up tool essentially links into your calendar. It will see in your calendar when you're free, and then it shows those times to prospective participants. So when a participant comes in, they just click on this link. They will only see slots that are free in your diary, and they can just book in directly. So you don't have to do any of that, to and froing. Are you free on this date? What about that date? It does it all for you. Is there anything that you would like to be adding here, Misael? I'm whizzing through.
No, I mean, always a challenge is to recruit the participants, and I think by giving something in return, just to appreciate the time that they will spend with you, I think it's gonna be great. It can be something really, really small, like a coffee card, a gift card from a coffee shop or something like that. I think it's always a great idea. I will talk more about how to find how to recruit users in just a bit.
Lovely. So the next step, we then go on to create a discussion guide. And I think of this very much like a script. So it's what are you going to say? What are you going to ask them to do? Slide, please. So normally the structure that we have here is kind of bespoke different sections. So always at the beginning, it's nice to have an introduction, allow them just to kind of calm down, get used to the space, get used to talking to you, get used to my strange English accent is normally a big part of this intro part of the test or of the conversation. We normally then only have the main body or the main test, so be that the prototype or the interview questions or the paper prototype or the card sort, like whatever it is that you're doing. We normally only have that for about 20, 30 minutes. And then at the end, I always like to give kind of open questions to participants, because quite often they're really excited to have been talking to someone and for someone to be listening to their opinion. So it's really nice at the end to be able to reflect on the experience and allow them to finish the session in their own time. And of course, as we've mentioned, always give them a thank you, really be appreciative of their time. And if you want, you can always kind of open the door for them to come back in the future. Slide, please. So the way we do this at Atlassian, as I mentioned, is we quite literally just have a meeting room and a laptop with a screen, and we sit in there and we hang out and we talk to users, we talk to non-users, we test the work that the teams have been doing. What's really one of the things that we do here is we use a video conferencing tool, and again, most video conferencing tools are free. And with a video conferencing tool, what we do is we actually stream, similar to what we're doing today, we stream the usability session, and then anyone in the team can log in and watch what we're doing in the usability session. So this is a really nice way to get the team involved, allow them to see what's happening. Sometimes we actually put it up on a big screen in one of the meeting rooms, and everyone kind of comes in and eats their lunch and watches what's going on. It's a really nice way to get the team involved. And then finally, at the end of the day, slide please. We analyze what it is that's happened. And this is so important to do. Like often in research, we get really excited when we speak to people, and then we kind of, finish our sentence on a comma and not a full stop. It's really important to come back and say, what have we found? What have we not found? What's been working? What do our next steps need to be? So just to go through this, slide please, there's 5 super, super simple steps. And I promise you, I did this in 24 hours. There is nothing stopping you doing the same thing. You just need a room and a laptop, and everything else you can more or less automate. So you need to find that space, you need to find your room, find your equipment. Then you need to tweet out or even walk out on the street and find some people to come in, put posters up in the elevator, find people in the neighborhood who you can speak to. Create that script, and that script can be really loose. It can just be 5 or 6 questions that you want to ask people just to get the ball rolling. And then you're there, you're testing your work, you're with your customers, finding out what their feedback is. And then so important just to kind of close that loop, communicate those findings, understand what's going on. Right. Slide please. So what we've done at Atlassian, I realize that's a super quick run through, is there's actually a blog on this, up on the internets, where you can go through each of these steps, and we've got lots of resources in there as well for you to be able to set up your own research lab. So I would love to see everybody doing this, and please do tweet me pictures of your research lab and the things that you've been testing. I'd love to see what's been going on out there.
Right. Thank you, Georgie, for sharing your experience. So what happens when you do not have a team in your same office, or perhaps your customers are not in the same office? What happens when you want to do user research in a distributed team? So basically, you go over the same process that Georgie just described, but here are some tips if you happen to be in a distributed team. So basically, you can run the same usability test through video calls. So basically, the same thing that you will do with someone in the room, you just do it through a call, through a Hangouts call. And remember that slide where Georgie was talking about analyzing the results? Well, you can do that as well if you use virtual sticky notes. I want to show you how to do it in just a bit. And if you do not know anybody, or if you want to have your users on board, but they happen to be in another city, or perhaps you don't know them or you don't have them, you can use screeners to recruit people. So basically, it's just a gateway in which if they fulfill the characteristics that you are looking for, they can apply to your test. And you can always do any other type of tests, such as card sorting or tree tests or surveys, through online tools as well. Optimal Workshop is a great tool for running card sorting. I've been using that a lot as well. So can you change the slide, Arturo? This is how I run usability testings remotely. So you can see that I'm using QuickTime to record the audio. I'm using Google Documents to have my script. I have Hangouts there, and I use InVision to have the action on the screen, whatever the user is doing. And this was the cost was absolutely zero, so no cost involved. So there's always a workaround that you can do, and there's no pretext to not doing usability tests or any kind of user research in your process. This is how you can use virtual sticky notes to run the affinity diagrams. Let's not go into details here, but I just want to convey the idea that anything is possible, even though you are in distributed teams. Okay, I think we're moving forward to the last part, which is, yeah,
Wait, but what's in it for the team?
yes. So all of this work that we have been doing, trying to sneak user research into Agile, it has to pay off, right? There's have to be a benefit for everybody in the team. So what's in it for product managers? Well, they can save time, and because they will know for sure that they are building the right thing, and obviously, saving time is saving money in our industry. Um, and what about for developers? Arturo. So basically, they get to learn from watching their own work in the wild. So this is what we were saying about involving others in the team. And they can also ideate other solutions based on what they see. Once they see the problem in action, in real life, they will start thinking immediately newer solutions for the same problem. Because they know the technology behind it, so they can know how to stretch that technology to solve the problem. And they will start developing empathy for the users.
One of the things I love to think of here is developer karma, and I know we've spoken about this
Right.
a little bit before. But I kind of feel like if you know that your developers are building the right thing, you're winning back an awful lot of karma points.
Right.
Because as you say, you're not wasting time and energy and their fantastic engineering talent on something that's not going to help the customers in the end.
Right. And for designers as well, you can have a lot of benefits because they will be confident about the decisions that they are making. There's always an itch that you might not be doing the right thing, but when you put this in the hands of the customers, you will be right. You will know that you're right or wrong at least, because you will have a better understanding of the problem because you are going to be validating your assumptions. So there's nothing in the air now. Everything is tangible and is validated with opinions from the customers.
And it just seems like a overall win-win all around. Like nobody wants to do something that doesn't matter or doesn't make a difference. And
So
if you're helping to guarantee that for
Right.
your entire team, it's pretty cool.
So in the end, if you can take anything from this webinar, would be this, which is it's not expensive at all. That's one myth busted now. That you should do it small and often. So there's no need to do a big research for months. You just need to make a portion of what you want to learn. Get everybody involved, right? Everybody from the team can participate and make this work visible in the backlog, please.
I think we have a really lovely quote here, which is from one of the developers that I work with at Atlassian, and we've talked a lot about getting the team involved in the benefits of usability testing. But I think this highlights it a little bit. So if you'll entertain me, I'd love to read this to you. So seeing users confused was somewhat frustrating, but I saw the value in our assumptions failing. Better to fail while prototyping than in production. You've got to get excited about hearing things that you don't want to hear.
Right. That's every myth out there busted now. I think we did a good job.
Yes, I think it's really exciting. And I think it's cool. I really like the idea of getting your whole team involved, and I liked the visibility of it. One of the takeaways for me personally is I liked what you do, the habit you have at Atlassian. At least I understood the idea of projecting your actual testing sessions. I presume in mute or something, but at least the visual of them, of what's going on in a room, and posting your findings, because it makes yourself present as well. And I'm assuming, and like it is at Nearsoft in most places, the UX and the designers are far outnumbered by developers, and so the more you can make yourself known, I think the better for you. And I really liked that. But before we do wrap up, there actually, and this is an important question because the same question came in twice from two different people. And I'll ask you, Arturo, it came in when we were looking at the diagram of the two, the graph with the two circle, like the flow chart. Go back to that. This Marty posted it, and then I'm not sure who this is, someone by the name of Smith, I believe, and they both had similar questions. The first one is, if you're working with 1 week sprints, okay, so 1 week sprints, how do you fit the research tasks without delaying the development phase? And then a very similar question came in independently of that, of what role should persons or play in development of user stories? And how do you integrate all of this into, again, a 1 or 2 week sprint? So the idea of Agile. So when we look at this, can you guys touch on that a bit, please?
Are you happy for me to dive in
Yes.
on this one?
I think we have the
So
same
I think
response, but yes.
I think it's useful to define what is happening in your 1 week sprint. Is that 1 week for development, or is that 1 week from finding a problem to having a solution in the hands of your customers? If you're looking at doing 1 week problem validation, I'd really suggest reading the kind of the Google Sprints stuff that they've been talking about quite a bit recently. But certainly the way that I would look at this diagram is on the right-hand side is your developer sprints. So this is where you are creating your validated solution. So this is when you
yellow,
have your
right? I'm sorry for interruption, but just to make sure we're not,
yeah,
just in case
absolutely.
with
Yeah,
projections.
that's the yellow loop.
Thank you.
Whereas the red loop is probably before your development work, ensuring that you have the right solution going into your backlog.
Right. The thing is that you need to be tracking all these problems, and as soon as you have an idea that something weird is going on, perhaps you can run into this sprints of 1 week just to understand what's going on before the development happens. So, short story, you need to move in advance of the development cycle.
Yep, spot on.
I think we can wrap up now. Or there's another question?
Cool. No, that's about it. Unless, real quick, last chance, folks. Any other questions for Georgie, Misael, before we sign off?
We really thank you for sticking around with us, even though we started a bit late.
Yes. So, yes, thank you. Thank you for your patience. This was really fun. I really felt like we were very universal, and I had people from all over, and it's exciting to me. So, thank you very much. First and foremost to you, Georgie, for being our guest presenter today. And of course, if you'd like to know more about Atlassian and Georgie and what she does, there's that information for you. If you could, the bit.ly/Atlassian @lab, and then of course there's Georgie's email address. Don't freak out, all of you who joined us in our webinar today. You will get the slide presentation emailed to you, so you don't have to scramble for your pens or your typos as you're hacking away on your computer. And then of course, if you're more interested in getting to know us better, you can keep following us at ux.nearsoft.com. Go ahead and give Sandra a phone call. She's a very, very lovely lady. Or email us at ux-team@nearsoft.com. So thank you, Georgie. It's a pleasure to meet you today. And Misael, as always. And thank you. So we're signing off. We hope you enjoyed us today. And take care, folks. And yes, UX research, Agile, they can go hand in hand. We hope that it helps you out.
Thank you for everybody for being here.
Bye.
Bye.